Well, hey everyone, welcome back after a week off, trying to take some of my own advice in recent weeks and do a little bit of rest in the midst of this sprint through the summer and through this pandemic. Listen, we started for a couple of weeks and I want to continue this week talking about how we do our very best, even in the midst of a challenging season, to move from survival to thriving. And could God possibly have that in mind? In week one, we said getting alone and quiet and resting with God is a big deal. A couple weeks ago, Carrie Hawkins helped us so much with how do we grieve through this and where does lament figure into that, along with the video from Jeremy Lopez. So helpful. One of the things that we're finding in this season, one of the things that I'm learning in this season about how to move from just kind of survival and trying to figure out what's up to a more of a sustainable, thriving kind of life is the power of a question. A really great question can shift perspective. A really great question can do lots of things. In fact, today, I just want to share 3 quick things that a great question can do. And then I want to invite you to share with us, what are some of the best things that happen when people ask you great questions? And maybe even, what are some of the best questions you've been asked? So here we go. The first thing a really great question does is it opens up new perspectives. A friend of mine would say it this way: it opens up new vistas to explore. As a teacher, one of the things I learned early on as like a 22-year-old starting out in teaching is that yes and no questions are only moderately helpful. And if you want to really instill terror in a student, ask a question that they have to try to guess the answer to. Like, you already know what it is, you're just trying to get them to say it. And worse yet are the kinds of questions that back people into a corner where they feel like there's only one answer to give. But if we were really to invite God into this season and move from survival to thriving, to look at some of the deep griefs or the opportunities that are in front of us and all the change that we're experiencing around us, we need good questions that open up new ways of thinking, that give us a different angle to look at things, to shift our perspective just a little bit. And a powerful question can do just that. The second thing is that great questions only get better with conversation. Reflecting on our own and certainly spending time alone with God, listening to God in the scripture and by his spirit is so important. But God has also placed his spirit in people around us. And when we choose trusted, wise people, our people, God's people, to speak into really great questions and explore those new vistas together, the question only gets better and often actually leads to yet another layer and another layer and another layer of question that is helpful, and suddenly we find ourselves exploring kind of the deep change, the kinds of things that God really wants to reorient us in the midst of the challenging season that we're in. And third, great questions, they require a response. But great questions, while the response is seldom quick, a response is needed. And often it's a substantial response, a whole new avenue of learning that we need to explore, or a change that we need to make in our discipline, our habit, our behaviors, our rest patterns, all kinds of actions that might come along with this, new relationships that might need to be formed, relationships that might need to be redefined. Great questions. As we explore them, we find that life the way it was before it was asked is not really an option anymore because of what we've seen now with the help of God and his people. So here's one example of a powerful question. What is God up to in multiple months of not gathering as a church? Now, I can answer that in some ways for myself. As a leader at Canyon Ridge, I can try to answer that for all of us. My guess is a lot of us have different experience. But if we start to ask the question, not just what do I miss about gathering, that's an important question. It'll probably lead to some grieving. We could ask a question like, when are we going to get back together? And I'm eager to know the answer to that question. But here we are right now, and a powerful question is, what is God up to in that? God and I have had a lot of conversations about this, and I've had some thoughts. And honestly, I've done that second thing that we talked about and carried that into some conversations with trusted people, and the conversations that have come out of that, the realizations, the things to consider that have come out of that for me with friends have been so rich and deep. Compared often by one friend to this image of chess, that if you're playing chess, and one of the best ways to get good at playing chess is to remove the queen and play without it, because you can become dependent on it. And I'm like, whoa, that's a powerful image. What if that's a piece of what God has been up to in us as the American church, as Canyon Ridge, our church? Lots of great conversation to be had there, which helps me explore that then with other people, and certainly it demands a response. It asks something different of me than waiting for something to come back or waiting on any number of leaders to make choices that bring back the thing that I miss. But instead, it asks me to say, okay, I really miss worshiping together. How is worship going to play an active role in my life right now? That's led to downloading tons of albums that I've asked other friends about, great worship albums. It's caused me to lean in differently with groups than I may have in the past. It's caused me to lean in with my kids differently than ever in the past. And God's up to something in the midst of all of that. Even in the great question itself, it presumes an answer. What is God up to? Because we know he's always up to something. You see, powerful questions are strong. And I know there's many, many other powerful questions that could be asked. Maybe in the midst of this season, what we need more than answers, as much as we would like them, are some really great questions. And so take a minute, jump into the comments, offer us some great questions. What are the things that God and God's people around you are prompting you to consider or reconsider and think deeply about? Perhaps in the midst of that, as we explore those things, that God will move us from a season of just surviving and waiting into thriving and seeing all the change he's bringing in us. It's going to be strong. I hope you'll jump into the comments and help us out. We'll talk to you soon.